Reba, honey, I have it, she squealed, hugging Reba and leaving a faint scent of lavender and desperation on her work shirt. The friendly, Texas is aesthetic. We're going to make this house feel like a warm hug from a neighbor you actually like. Barbara Jean, Reba said slowly, trying to maintain her sanity. This is a flip. It needs to be neutral. Grays, whites, maybe a greige if we're feeling spicy. We want people to see themselves here, not a hug from a stranger. Oh, Reba, you're so cynical, Barbara Jean said, spreading her magazines across a dusty countertop. Look at this. Boho chic, Western Zen. It's the next big thing. We need a feature wall in the living room. Something bold. Something that says, I have a personality and I'm not afraid to use it. Van walked in, covered in sawdust. I like bold. It's bolder, Van, Barbara Jean cried. It's turquoise dream. For the next 4 hours, Reba fought a losing battle against the turquoise tide. Every time she turned her back, Barbara Jean was pitching a whimsical light fixture or a tile pattern that looked like a kaleidoscope had an accident. But as Reba watched, Barbara Jean watched the way she genuinely cared about making the space beautiful, she realized something. Barbara Jean wasn't just trying to design a house. She was trying to design a place where she belonged. Okay, Reba said, finally putting down her scraper. One feature wall, in the small bedroom. If the buyers hate it, we can paint over it in an hour. Barbara Jean's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh, Reba, you won't regret this. It's going to be a masterpiece. As Barbara Jean skipped off to the hardware store, Reba looked at Van. We are going to lose so much money, aren't we? Van put an arm around her, his dusty shoulder rubbing against hers. Maybe. But hey, at least we'll have stones. Turquoise ones. Chapter 9. The Dust and the Dream. By the middle of the second week, the steel house had been stripped to its bones. The turquoise feature wall was done, looking like a neon bruise in the middle of a beige room. But Barbara Jean was delighted. Reba, on the other hand, was calculating the cost of a bucket of white primer. It's about the journey, Mrs. H., Van said, his face smeared with soot. He had spent the morning in the crawl space, trying to figure out why the guest bathroom smelled like low tide. The journey is currently costing us $500 a day in interest, and I'm pretty sure Cheyenne just threw her wedding ring into the dumpster by accident, Reba replied, pointing to her daughter who was currently waist-deep in construction debris. I found it, Cheyenne shrieked, emerging with a coffee-stained hand clutching a diamond, and a vintage soda bottle. Maybe we can sell this on eBay. Every little bit helps, Reba muttered. As they worked, a strange peace settled over the house. For the first time in years, the family was pulled together by a common goal. They weren't just fixing a house. They were building a bridge over the wreckage of the last decade. Brock stopped by more often, offering dental advice that was actually just an excuse to bring more tacos. Even Barbara Jean seemed less manic, her ruffles traded for a pair of denim overalls that she wore with a surprising amount of grace. You know, Barbara Jean said, sitting on the floor of what would be the new kitchen, I used to think that being happy was about having everything perfect. But this place, it's a mess, and I've never felt more alive. Reba looked at her. That's the adrenaline, Barbara Jean, or the fumes from the floor stripper. Either way, enjoy it while it lasts. But as Reba turned back to the window she was sanding, she found herself smiling. Maybe Van was right. Maybe the froth on the market wasn't a bubble about to burst, but a wave they could finally learn to ride. Chapter 10. The Neighbor from Hell. Just as things were looking up, the universe reminded Reba that her luck was rarely a straight line. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and a woman who looked like she had been carved out of a very expensive piece of granite stepped out. She marched up the driveway, her heels clicking like gunshots. I am Mrs. Gable, the woman announced, not bothering with a greeting. And I am the president of the Homeowners Association for this block, which, I might add, does not allow unauthorized structural modifications or visual disturbances like that thing in the window. She pointed to the turquoise wall, which was visible through the uncurtained glass. It's a feature wall, Barbara Jean piped up, appearing behind Reba. It's boho chic. It's a violation, Mrs. Gable snapped. And I have it on good authority from a very reputable real estate agent, a Mr. David Davids, that you are operating without a commercial flipping license. Reba's blood ran cold. David Davids told you that? He was very concerned about the integrity of the neighborhood, Mrs. Gable said, handing Reba a thick envelope. This is a cease and desist. You have 48 hours to provide proof of all permits and licenses, or the city will red tag this property. And believe me, I will be watching. She turned and marched back to her car, leaving Reba standing in the dust of her own ambition. He's trying to freeze us out, Reba whispered. He knows we can't afford a delay. If the city shuts us down, the bank pulls the loan. We lose the house, the money, and Van's credit. Van walked out, his linebacker shoulders sagging. What do we do, Mrs. H? Reba looked at the turquoise wall, then at her family. The fire in her red hair seemed to catch. We do what hearts always do. Van, we fight. Cheyenne, get me the phone. Barbara Jean, get me a gallon of Grage paint. We're going to give Mrs. Gable a neighborhood she'll never forget. Chapter 11. The Midnight Paint Job. The next 48 hours were a blur of caffeine and desperation. Reba spent the day at the city permit office, navigating a labyrinth of red tape that David Davids had clearly greased with a few well-placed donations. Meanwhile, back at the house, Van and Brock were performing a miracle of plumbing and electrical work. They weren't professionals, but they had stones and a YouTube tutorial for everything. If this wire touches this pipe, does the house explode? Only if you're thinking negative thoughts, Doc, Van shouted from the other room. Positive vibes only. When the sun went down, the real work began. They couldn't let Mrs. Gable see the turquoise wall through the window, but they didn't want to lose Barbara Jean's masterpiece just yet. We're going to build a false wall, Reba commanded. A thin sheet of drywall, painted the most boring shade of taupe known to man. We place it 6 inches in front of the turquoise wall. To the HOA, it looks neutral. To us, the dream stays alive. They worked through the night, lit by work lamps, and fueled by the sheer spite of David David's sabotage. By 4 a.m., the house looked like a model home, sterile, safe, and utterly unoffensive. As they sat on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold that made Barbara Jean's turquoise look subtle by comparison, a sense of grim triumph settled over them. We did it, Cheyenne whispered, leaning her head on Van's shoulder. We're not done yet, Reba said, her eyes fixed on the road. Mrs. Gable will be here at 8, and I'm going to have the coffee ready. Chapter 12. The Storm. 8 o'clock came with the sound of a luxury car engine. Mrs. Gable arrived, flanked by a man in a city inspector's uniform. Reba stood on the porch, wearing her best, I'm a professional, and I haven't slept in 3 days smile. Good morning, Mrs. Gable. Inspector, would you like a tour? They walked through the house, the inspector checking permits with a meticulousness that suggested he had been told to find something wrong. But thanks to Reba's marathon at the city office, every T was crossed and every I was dotted. Mrs. Gable stood in the bedroom, staring at the false wall. It's very neutral. It's what the market demands, Reba said, her heart hammering against her ribs. Well, the inspector said, shutting his clipboard. Everything seems to be in order. No violations here. Mrs. Gable looked disappointed, but she couldn't argue with the paperwork. As they left, Reba leaned against the doorframe, her legs finally giving out. We won, Van cheered, lifting Reba into a bear hug. But as the afternoon progressed, the sky turned a bruised purple. A classic Texas thunderstorm was brewing, the kind that turned streets into rivers and tested every shingle on a roof. Van, Reba said, looking up at a dark spot on the ceiling. Did you finish the flashing on the chimney? Van's face went pale. I was going to do that today, before the HOA lady arrived. A loud crack of thunder shook the house, and a single drop of water fell from the ceiling, landing right in the middle of the neutral taupe false wall. Oh, no, Barbara Jean whispered. The dream is getting wet. The sky opened up, and the steel house began to reveal its final, most devastating secret. It wasn't just a fixer-upper, it was a sieve.